Hey guys, picture this. March 24th, 1944, 10:30 at night. Squadron Leader Roger Bushell crawls out of a tunnel called Harry into the freezing German darkness. He's been digging for a year. This tunnel was supposed to be their ticket to freedom. But something's wrong. The tunnel's come up short, way short. Instead of emerging safely in the woods, he's right in the guard tower's line of sight. 76 men are about to follow him up, and Hitler himself is going to order 50 of them executed. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Get comfortable. Turn off the lights. Let your mind drift back to 1943. If you're new here, hit subscribe for more stories like this, and drop a comment. Where are you listening from? What time is it there? I love seeing how these old stories travel around the world while you're winding down. Tonight we're going back to when hope was a hand-carved compass, and freedom was 300 feet of tunnel you dug with spoons. Chapter 1. The fortress opens its gates. Spring 1943. Somewhere in Nazi Germany, 100 miles from any neutral border, the Luftwaffe has just finished their masterpiece. Stalag Luft III. They're calling it the escape-proof prison camp, built on sand so you can't tunnel, huts raised on stilts so you can't hide contraband, microphones buried everywhere to catch digging sounds, guard towers every 50 yards, double barbed wire fences. This place, it's designed to break the spirit of every Allied airman who walks through those gates. Dawn breaks on a perfect spring morning, birds singing in the pine trees, wildflowers blooming along the forest edge, the kind of morning that makes you forget there's a war on. Then the gates swing open with a metallic screech. First truck rolls in, packed with RAF pilots shot down over Germany. These men, 3 weeks ago they were flying Spitfires and Lancasters. Now they're property of the Reich. The guards watch them climb down, exhausted, defeated, or so it seems. The commandant steps forward. Oberst Friedrich von Lindeiner, career Luftwaffe officer. He's not cruel, just thorough. Gentlemen, he announces in perfect English. Welcome to your new home. You will find escape impossible. The camp is built on sand. Any tunneling will collapse. The huts are elevated. Hiding places do not exist. Microphones detect vibration. Guard towers provide complete coverage. I suggest you make your peace with this place. The POWs listen, stone-faced. Some are already taking notes. They're marched past the warning wire. Yellow rope stretched 18 inches high around the perimeter. Step over it, you get shot. No questions asked. The guards explain this in broken English, miming gunshots. Some laugh, the prisoners don't. They've heard the stories. Beyond the warning wire, 30 feet of dirt, then double barbed wire fences, 15 feet high, coiled razor wire on top. Guard towers with machine guns and searchlights, every angle covered, every escape route impossible. That's the idea anyway. The huts are simple, long wooden barracks raised 3 feet off the ground on concrete blocks. Inside, bunk beds, 3 tiers high, straw mattresses, 1 thin blanket each, a single potbelly stove for heat, windows too small to crawl through, floors that creak if you breathe wrong. The sand underneath, pale yellow stuff that squeaks when you walk on it, shows footprints like snow. Even if you could dig, where would you put all that sand? The Germans thought of everything. Or they think they did. More trucks arrive throughout the day. American pilots from B-17s shot down over France. Canadian bomber crews, Polish fighter pilots, free French aviators, Czechs, Norwegians, men from every corner of the Allied war effort. All of them officers, all of them aircrew. The Geneva Convention says officers can't be forced to work, so they just sit and think and watch. The Germans figure that's punishment enough. Idle hands, idle minds. They're about to learn how wrong they are. The ferrets make their first appearance. German guards in blue overalls. Their job? Hunt for escape attempts. They crawl under huts with flashlights, tap walls listening for hollow spots, measure room dimensions looking for discrepancies, count bedboards to make sure none are missing. They're thorough, professional, some even friendly. They take pride in their work, finding escape attempts before they start. It's a game to them, cat and mouse. They have no idea what's coming. By evening, the camp settles into routine. Roll call at dawn and dusk. Meals of black bread and watery soup. Mail call twice a week. Red Cross parcels if you're lucky. Men write letters home on paper thin as tissue. Play chess with pieces carved from soap. Read books until they fall apart. Some exercise, some pace, some just stare at the fences. But others are already taking measurements, counting guard rotations, testing the sand with their fingers. 3 weeks in, Squadron Leader Roger Bushell arrives. South African-born, Cambridge-educated, lawyer-turned-RAF pilot, shot down over France after ramming a German fighter. The kind of man who walks into a room and everyone pays attention. 33 years old, sharp mind, sharper temper. He's already escaped twice from other camps, both times recaptured, both times punished. The Gestapo has a file on him, 3 inches thick. He's exactly what this camp doesn't need. Bushell surveys his new home with calculating eyes, walks the perimeter, studies the guards, talks to the other prisoners, listens to their complaints about the sand, the raised huts, the microphones. Everyone says the same thing. It can't be done. This place is escape-proof. Bushell just smiles. That South African accent carries a hint of mockery when he speaks. "Gentlemen," he says quietly, "I think we need to have a meeting. There's something I want to discuss with you all." The meeting happens after lights out. 30 men crowded into Hut 104. Bushell stands in the center, voice barely above a whisper. The Germans think this place is escape-proof. They're wrong. Sandy soil? Perfect for tunneling if you know what you're doing. Raised huts? Excellent cover for digging. Microphones? They can be fooled. I'm proposing something audacious. Not 1 tunnel. 3. Code names: Tom, Dick, and Harry. Goal: 200 men. The biggest prison break in military history. Who's with me? Silence. Then questions. How do you hide sand that shows every grain? How do you dig without triggering microphones? How do you move 200 men without guards noticing? Bushell has answers for everything. Sand gets dispersed grain by grain through holes in trouser pockets. Digging happens during guard shift changes, when microphones are recalibrated. 200 men? That's why you need 3 tunnels. Insurance. The Germans caught him twice before. This time, he's not planning to get caught. This time, he's playing for keeps. Chapter 2. An audacious proposal. By mid-1943, the camp's settled into its rhythm. Guards think they've got everything under control. Prisoners going through the motions. Morning roll call, afternoon exercise, lights out. But in the back rooms of Hut 104, something's stirring. Roger Bushell's been watching, taking notes, and he's starting to gather a very specific kind of man. Not just anyone who wants out. The specialists. The ones with skills the guards don't even know exist in this place. See, most escape attempts are amateur hour. Guy digs under a fence, gets caught in the searchlights. Maybe 2 or 3 men make it to the wire before the dogs find them. That's not what Bushell has in mind. He's thinking bigger, way bigger, and for that, he needs artists, forgers who can turn a scrap of paper into a travel document, tailors who can transform prison uniforms into civilian clothes, men who can build compasses from phonograph records and stolen wire. The word goes out quietly. If you've got a skill the Germans don't know about, Bushell wants to meet you. Flight Lieutenant Tommy Guest. He was a forger before the war. Perfect. Squadron Leader Tim Wallen knows languages, can coach men on German accents. Johnny Travis can sew anything. Bob Nelson builds things with his hands. One by one, they're invited to a very private conversation in Bushell's bunk, and what he tells them changes everything about their time in Stalag Luft III. Picture this meeting. Maybe 20 men crammed into a space meant for 6 bunks. Summer heat making the barracks stifling. Everyone sweating, partly from temperature, partly from nerves. Because what Bushel's about to propose, it's not just escape, it's warfare. Psychological warfare against the German war machine. He stands up, looks each man in the eye, and drops the bombshell. 3 tunnels, not 1, 3. Each one designed to get over 200 men out of this camp simultaneously. The room goes dead silent. 200 men per tunnel. That's 600 Allied officers loose in Nazi Germany at the same time. The manhunt alone would tie up thousands of German troops, police, Gestapo agents, resources that should be fighting on the front lines. It's not about getting home anymore. It's about creating chaos behind enemy lines. And the tunnels? He's already got names for them. Tom, Dick, and Harry, like they're his 3 sons he's sending off to war. You have to understand Bushell at this moment. This isn't some desperate guy clinging to false hope. This is a trained lawyer, an RAF squadron leader, someone who's escaped before and gotten caught before. He knows exactly what they're up against. The dogs, the guards, the 100 miles to any neutral border. But here's what gets me about him. He doesn't care about the odds. He cares about the principle. No Allied officer should accept permanent captivity. Period. It's duty. And something electric happens in that room. These men have been warehoused for months, some for years, feeling useless while the war rages on without them, playing cards, reading the same books over and over, counting days until, what, maybe never getting home, maybe dying in this place. But now Bushell's offering them something else, purpose, a mission that matters, a chance to hit back. The mood shifts from resigned despair to dangerous determination. Look around these barracks with me for a second. Wooden bunks stacked 3 high, maybe 18 inches between your face and the ceiling when you're lying down. No privacy whatsoever. Thin walls that carry every conversation, every snore, every nightmare, the smell of too many unwashed men in too small a space, dust from the sandy soil that gets into everything. This is where they'll plan the most ambitious prison break in history, in these cramped, suffocating boxes built specifically to break their spirit. But here's what the Germans didn't count on. Human imagination doesn't need space to soar. Lock up a bunch of intelligent, trained military officers, and their minds start working overtime. They look at their bunk beds and see support beams for tunnel shoring. They look at their eating utensils and see digging tools. They look at their bed sheets and see rope. Every mundane object in this place becomes a potential weapon in their war against captivity. The audacity is breathtaking. The intelligence officers, these guys become absolutely crucial. See, you can't just dig 3 tunnels and hope for the best. You need to know guard schedules, patrol routes, when the ferrets do their sweeps. Which guards can be bribed, which ones are too dangerous to approach, what's happening beyond the wire, where the train stations are, what papers civilians carry, how to blend in with German workers. Intelligence gathering becomes a full-time job for several men who suddenly have purpose again. This is wartime strategy at its most intimate level. Not generals moving armies across maps, but prisoners figuring out how to move sand one handful at a time without getting caught. How to steal materials without anyone noticing they're gone. How to coordinate hundreds of men in a mission that requires perfect timing and absolute secrecy. Every detail matters. One mistake, one careless moment, one guy who talks too much, and everyone dies. Or worse, they disappear into Gestapo custody. What strikes me most about this whole operation is the technical challenges they're embracing. Think about ventilating a tunnel 300 feet long with nothing but homemade equipment. How do you dispose of tons of sandy soil when every grain has to disappear without a trace? How do you light an underground workspace when electric torches are contraband? These aren't just prisoners anymore. They're becoming engineers, architects, project managers, building an underground city beneath the most secure prison in Nazi Germany. And the psychological transformation happening here, it's remarkable. Months ago, these men were beaten down, going through the motions of prison routine. Now they're walking taller, talking in hushed, excited whispers, meeting each other's eyes with something that wasn't there before. Conspiracy, purpose, the absolute conviction that they're about to achieve something impossible. Bushell's fire has spread to every man in that room. They're not just planning an escape anymore, they're planning a war. But wars require sacrifice. And as these men shake hands and commit to Bushell's insane vision, they know what they're really signing up for. Months of back-breaking labor in claustrophobic tunnels, constant fear of discovery, and if they're caught, well, escaping prisoners don't always make it back to solitary confinement. Sometimes they're shot trying to escape, sometimes they just vanish. But right now, in this moment, none of that matters. They have work to do. Chapter 3. Underground Factories. Picture this. Every single bed in the compound suddenly feels like sleeping on a trampoline. Why? Because Bushell's crew just ripped out over 4,000 bedboards. 4,000. Every wooden slat that kept prisoners off their sagging mattresses, gone, disappeared into the tunnels below. The guards notice, of course. Men lying on mattresses that sag almost to the floor. But what can they do? Beds fall apart. Wood rots. Accidents happen, right? Meanwhile, those boards are holding up an entire underground city. Down in Harry, those stolen bedboards create something incredible. A wooden skeleton running 300 feet through German soil. Every few yards, another timber frame. Every few feet, another support beam. It's like a mine shaft, except it's 2 feet tall and barely wide enough for a man's shoulders. You're crawling through a wooden tunnel that's holding back tons of earth, supported entirely by furniture. The Germans thought was keeping prisoners comfortable upstairs. The air down there should kill you in minutes. 30 feet underground, 300 feet from the entrance, with tons of sandy soil pressing down, you'd suffocate before you made it halfway. But the POWs solve this with pure brilliance. They build air pumps from kit bags and metal tubing, crude leather bellows made from anything they can steal. One man pumps, another digs. Fresh air flows through pipes cobbled together from tin cans and whatever the Germans haven't nailed down yet. Here's what gets me about these air pumps. They work. Grown men can dig for hours 30 feet underground because someone above is manually pumping air like their life depends on it. Because it does. The pump operator sits in a chamber barely big enough for his body, working a homemade bellows system for 6-hour shifts. His shoulders ache, his lungs burn from the stale air he's breathing. But down the tunnel, fresh air keeps flowing to the digger. Now comes the impossible part. Every shovel of sand you dig has to disappear, can't pile it outside, can't hide it in the huts. Guards would notice instantly. So they invent something called the trouser bag system. Imagine sewing cloth bags inside your trouser legs, filling them with sandy soil, then walking casually around the compound while slowly releasing sand through tiny holes, grain by grain, all day long. Hundreds of prisoners dispersing tons of evidence, one footstep at a time. The sand dispersal becomes an art form. You're walking to the latrine, trickling sand. Heading to the mess hall, more sand. Standing around chatting with friends, still more sand. Every prisoner becomes a human hourglass, slowly emptying German soil from their trouser legs onto German ground. The guards see men walking around all day, but they can't see the tunnels being dug beneath their feet, one grain of sand at a time. But here's where it gets wild. They're not just digging a hole, they're building an entire underground operation. Forgers creating fake documents in chambers lit by stolen electric bulbs. Tailors converting uniforms into civilian clothes, using thread pulled from blankets. And get this, compass makers melting down phonograph records to create magnetic needles. The Germans let prisoners keep their record players for morale. Those records become navigation tools for men planning to cross 100 miles of enemy territory. The compass making blows my mind. You take a phonograph record, something innocent, something the guards encourage because music keeps prisoners happy. Heat it carefully until the material becomes moldable. Shape it into a tiny magnetized needle. Mount it on a pivot made from watch parts. Suddenly you've got a functioning compass that could guide you to freedom. All from Glenn Miller records and broken wristwatches. The ingenuity is incredible. Picture the underground chambers now. Workshop areas carved from solid earth, big enough for men to sit and work. Electric lights stolen from German installations casting shadows on sandy walls. The air thick and humid, barely breathable, but filled with concentrated activity. Forgers hunched over fake papers, tailors stitching civilian disguises, compass makers heating phonograph records over improvised candles. It's like a secret factory buried beneath the prison camp, humming with quiet, desperate productivity. The atmosphere down there, it's claustrophobic and empowering at the same time. You're literally buried alive, working by candlelight in spaces barely big enough to sit upright. The weight of earth above your head, the constant fear of cave-ins, but also this incredible sense of purpose. Every man knows exactly what he's doing and why. Every forged document, every modified uniform, every homemade compass brings 200 prisoners closer to freedom. That focus, that shared mission, it transforms terror into determination. What strikes me most is the camaraderie. Men who barely knew each other before the war, now trusting their lives to strangers in underground chambers. The digger depends on the pump operator for air. The forger needs the tailor's civilian clothes. The compass maker's work guides the intelligence officer's escape routes. Everyone's survival depends on everyone else's expertise. It creates bonds stronger than blood, brotherhood forged in sand and darkness, and shared risk. By winter of 1943, Harry has become something the Germans never imagined. Not just a tunnel, an entire underground civilization, complete with air circulation systems, electric lighting, workshops, storage chambers, and disposal networks. 300 feet of hand-dug tunnel, supported by 4,000 stolen bedboards, staffed by specialists working in shifts around the clock, all of it invisible to guards walking directly overhead, all of it aimed at one impossible goal, putting 200 men outside the wire. The Germans designed Stalag Luft III to be escape-proof. They buried microphones to detect digging, posted ferrets to search for tunnel entrances, built huts on stilts so nothing could be hidden underneath, used sandy soil that would collapse any amateur tunnel attempt, every possible security measure. But they couldn't account for this level of ingenuity. They couldn't imagine prisoners turning their own furniture into tunnel supports, their entertainment into navigation tools, their clothing into excavation equipment. As winter deepens and 1944 approaches, Harry nears completion. The underground factory hums with final preparations, forged documents ready, civilian disguises finished, compasses calibrated, escape routes memorized. Above ground, prisoners sleep on sagging mattresses, pretending everything's normal. Below ground, the greatest prison break in history approaches its moment of truth. 200 men, one tunnel, 300 feet to freedom, and Hitler's Germany waiting on the other side. Chapter 4. Tunnels. Tom and Dick, a brush with disaster. Winter 1943. Stalag Luft III. The ferrets are getting smarter. Those German guards whose job it is to sniff out escape attempts. They're not the bumbling idiots the POWs hoped for. They're methodical, patient, and they're starting to notice things. Little things. Like how certain prisoners always seem to have dirt under their fingernails. How some barracks produce way too much sand when they're cleaning them. The net is closing, fast. For months, Tom, Dick and Harry have been the lifeline. 3 tunnels, 3 chances. The mathematics of hope, you could say. If one gets discovered, 2 remain. If 2 get found, there's still 1 left. It's not foolproof, but it's something. Problem is, the ferrets are starting to connect dots that shouldn't be connected. They're mapping prisoner movements, timing work shifts, and they're getting uncomfortably close to the truth. The whole operation hangs by a thread. December 1943. The call every tunneler dreads. Tom is blown. A ferret literally falls through the entrance while inspecting Hut 123, just drops right into the tunnel opening. Can you imagine that moment? Months of back-breaking work, thousands of bedboards, gallons of sweat and hope, gone in one terrifying second. The ferret climbs out, dusts himself off, and smiles. Game over for Tunnel Tom. But here's the thing, they still don't know about Dick or Harry. The destruction of Tom hits the prisoners like a punch to the gut. Not just the diggers. Everyone. Because Tom wasn't just a tunnel. It was proof their plan could work. Proof they could outsmart their captors. Now it's gone. Filled with concrete. Sealed forever. You can see it in their faces at evening roll call. That deflated look of men who just watched months of their lives get erased. But Roger Bushell? He's not backing down. 2 tunnels left. The mission continues. 3 weeks later, another disaster. Dick gets discovered too. Same story, different hut. A ferret poking around where he shouldn't be, finds what he shouldn't find. 2 tunnels down, the prisoners are starting to whisper, maybe this whole thing is cursed. Maybe the Germans really have built the perfect prison. Maybe escape isn't possible after all. The winter of 1943 is turning into something darker than anyone expected. Hope is becoming a luxury they can't afford. Now there's only Harry. 1 tunnel, 1 chance. Everything they've worked for, everything they've risked, comes down to this single shaft beneath Hut 104. The pressure is crushing. Before, if Harry got discovered, they still had options. Now, Harry is the option. It's all or nothing, and the ferrets know something's still happening. They can smell it. They're watching, waiting, hunting for that 3rd tunnel. There sure exists somewhere in the camp. This is where the mental game gets brutal. Every day, the Harry team goes down into that tunnel knowing it could be their last time. Knowing a ferret could be waiting at the bottom, or worse, the tunnel could be filled with concrete when they arrive. That happened to other camps. Prisoners would show up for their shift and find their life's work destroyed overnight. The paranoia is eating them alive. Trust no one. Suspect everyone. Winter in a POW camp is miserable under normal circumstances. Now add the stress of a secret operation hanging by a thread. The barracks are freezing. Food is scarce. Everyone's sick, or getting sick. And still they dig. Still they haul sand, still they take apart bedboards and shore up tunnel walls. Because what's the alternative? Give up? Except that this camp really is escape-proof. Some men are ready to quit, others double down harder. The psychological toll is harder to measure than the physical one. But it's there. You can see it in how men eat their thin soup. Slow, distracted, like they're somewhere else entirely. Some are already somewhere else. They're out, free. Walking through London streets or flying Spitfires again. Daydreaming is all some of them have left. The tunnel work continues, but the joy is gone. Now it's just stubborn refusal to surrender. January 1944, the questioning starts. Not the kind where Germans interrogate prisoners, the kind where prisoners interrogate themselves. Was this whole thing a mistake? Are they putting everyone at risk for nothing? Tom and Dick didn't just fail, they were discovered, which means the Germans are getting better at this game. Maybe the smart play is to sit tight, keep your head down, and wait for the war to end. Maybe heroics are stupidity in disguise. But then something shifts. Maybe it's Bushell's quiet determination. Maybe it's just pride. but the resolve comes back stronger than before. Losing Tom and Dick wasn't defeat, it was education. They learned what works and what doesn't. They learned how ferrets think, how they search, where they look. The failures weren't setbacks, they were intelligence. And now all that intelligence gets poured into Harry, all the eggs, one basket. Do or die. The work on Harry becomes obsessive, every board placement perfect, every handful of sand accounted for, every voice lowered to a whisper because they can't afford another discovery. This isn't just about escape anymore, it's about proving something, to themselves, to the Germans, to history. Maybe, that some people can't be kept in cages, that some spirits don't break, that freedom is worth everything, including death. By February, Harry is deeper than Tom or Dick ever were. Longer, more sophisticated. The air pumps work better, the shoring is stronger, the sand disposal more efficient. It's like the tunnel is learning from its dead siblings' mistakes, getting smarter, getting hungrier for that final breakthrough into German soil beyond the wire. The ferrets keep searching, keep digging random holes, keep trying to find what they know is there. They're close. So close. March approaches. Spring is coming to Germany, and with it, escape season. Harry is almost ready. Almost long enough. The tension in the camp is thick enough to cut with a knife. Everyone knows something big is about to happen. The Germans sense it too. Extra patrols, more random inspections, searchlights sweeping the compound at odd hours. It's a race now. Who gets there first? The breakout or the breakdown? The stakes have never been higher. Chapter 5. Winter of Perseverance. December 1943. Stalag Luft III gets buried under 3 feet of snow. The kind of cold that makes your breath freeze mid-air. Guards huddle in their towers, stamping their feet. Smart money says tunnel work stops completely. Who'd be crazy enough to crawl underground when it's -20 above? But here's what the Germans didn't understand about these guys. Cold weather, that just meant better cover. More darkness, longer nights to work. Winter wasn't stopping them, it was helping them. The sand in Harry turns to concrete when it freezes. Literally, you touch the tunnel walls and chunks fall off like ice. But watch this. They figured out the physics. Body heat. 20 guys working underground. The temperature stays just warm enough. Their breath creates this weird microclimate down there. It's actually warmer 30 feet underground than it is in the huts above. Nature working for them instead of against them. The tunnel becomes their shelter from the storm. Pretty brilliant when you think about it. Here's a detail that gets me. They're wearing summer clothes down there. Whatever they were shot down in. Some guy from Texas working in shorts and a t-shirt while snow piles up overhead. The Canadians? They're practically naked compared to what they're used to. But nobody complains. You know why? Because complaining about being cold while digging your way to freedom, that's just not something these men do. They save their energy for moving sand, one grain at a time. The winter shift schedule gets brutal. Shorter days mean longer work periods underground. They're pulling 12-hour shifts now, crawling in at dusk, coming up at dawn. Some guys don't see sunlight for days, just artificial lamplight and tunnel darkness. The psychological toll? Imagine being buried alive for half your life. But morale stays solid, actually gets stronger. There's something about shared misery that bonds people. They're not just digging a tunnel anymore, they're proving something to themselves. January brings new problems. The ground freezes solid, surface disposal becomes impossible, can't scatter sand when it's locked under ice. So they adapt. Everything goes to Dick now. The abandoned tunnel becomes their dumping ground, hauling sand through Harry, dumping it in Dick, sealing both ends. It's like hiding evidence inside other evidence. The Germans walk right over Dick every day, never knowing it's stuffed full of Harry's secrets. Layers of deception, frozen in time. The trouser bag system gets upgraded for winter. Frozen sand weighs more. Regular bags split, so they double layer everything. Sew extra seams, create these industrial strength sand pouches. Picture this, guys walking around camp looking completely normal while carrying 30 pounds of frozen tunnel sand in their pants. The guards think they're just cold, walking stiff-legged. If they only knew, every step distributes evidence of the biggest escape attempt in history, right under their noses. Keeping warm becomes an art form. They burn furniture, bed slats, anything wooden. The forgers work by candlelight, fingers so cold they can barely hold pens. But watch this genius move. They take turns being the human heater. One guy sits on the stove, gets warm, then switches with the next guy, like a rotation system for body heat. Community warming. Nobody stays cold while others are comfortable. That's the code. That's how they survive winter without breaking. Underground, something beautiful happens. The tunnel becomes their sanctuary, away from German eyes, away from winter wind. Down there they can talk freely, plan freely, laugh without looking over their shoulders. The work creates this rhythm. Pass the sand, shore the walls, check the air pump. Whispered conversations about home, about after the war, about anything except where they are right now. It's meditation through labor, hope through repetition, freedom through dirt. Christmas approaches, and someone gets an idea. Why not celebrate, really celebrate, not with self-pity or depression, but with defiance, with joy? They start planning in secret, scrounging materials, saving Red Cross rations, organizing entertainment. The guards think they're planning escape activities, which, okay, they are, but they're also planning something else. A Christmas that'll remind them they're still human, still alive, still unbroken. The Germans can imprison their bodies, but Christmas, that belongs to them. December 24th, 1943, Christmas Eve in a Nazi prison camp. But walk into the main hut tonight, it looks magical. Paper snowflakes cut from German newspapers, decorations made from tin cans, a tree carved from bedboards, candles everywhere. They're singing carols in 6 languages, British, American, Canadian, Polish, Czech voices blending together. The guards hear it, and they stop patrolling. Just listen. Even Nazis recognize something sacred when they hear it. Music transcending barbed wire. The gift exchange blows my mind. What do you give someone when you own nothing? They get creative. Hand-carved chess pieces, portraits drawn on cardboard, poems written on toilet paper. One guy gives another guy his only warm socks. Someone else shares their last chocolate bar, split 50 ways. The value isn't monetary, it's personal, it's hope. Every gift says the same thing. We're getting out of here together. We're going home. This isn't forever. Outside, German guards pace their towers, cold, miserable, homesick, listening to enemy prisoners celebrating Christmas with more joy than they've felt in months. Think about that irony. The captives are happier than their captors. The prisoners are freer than their guards, because freedom isn't about location, it's about spirit. And these men, their spirits are unbreakable. The Germans control their bodies, but inside, where it matters, they're already free, already home. Christmas morning changes everything. Not just the mood, the commitment. They wake up different, more determined, more unified. The celebration didn't distract from the escape, it fueled it, reminded them what they're fighting for, what they're going home to. From this day forward, Harry gets their absolute everything, every ounce of strength, every minute of time, every grain of sand. Winter tried to break them. Instead, it forged them into something stronger, something unstoppable. January rolls into February, days slowly getting longer, spring still months away, but you can feel it coming. The work in Harry intensifies. They're past the wire now, under the forest. Every foot forward brings freedom closer. The brutal winter is ending, but it taught them something important. They can survive anything, endure anything. The cold, the dark, the despair, none of it could stop them. And if winter couldn't break them, nothing could. The escape is coming. Chapter 6. Spring's arrival. The Great Escape begins. March 1944. After 11 months of digging, spring finally arrives at Stalag Luft III. The snow's melting, days getting longer, and Roger Bushell knows this is it. The window they've been waiting for. Harry Tunnel is complete. 200 men have been training, memorizing routes, practicing their cover stories. The forgers have been working overtime, civilian clothes hidden, compasses ready. Tonight, March 24th, under cover of darkness, the Great Escape begins, 10:30 p.m. The camp is settling into its usual nighttime routine, guards walking their beats, searchlights sweeping predictable patterns. But inside Hut 104, everything is different. Bushell gives the final briefing, quiet voices, tense faces. These men have rehearsed this moment in their minds 1,000 times. The first 20 are suited up in civilian clothes, maps tucked into hidden pockets, false papers in order. At 11 p.m. sharp, they'll break through that final few inches of dirt separating them from freedom. Johnny Bull goes first. The tunnel opener. He crawls the full 300 feet in complete darkness, feeling his way to where Harry should emerge in the pine woods beyond the fence. But when he breaks through, this is the moment everything changes. The tunnel isn't in the woods. It's 10 feet short. 10 feet that might as well be 10 miles. Instead of emerging safely in the trees, he's right there in the open. Guard towers looming overhead, searchlights sweeping past. Bull crawls back through 300 feet of tunnel to deliver the devastating news. 10 feet short. The calculations were off. Months of precise planning, and they're exposed. Bushell has seconds to decide. Call it off or adapt. 200 men are counting on this. Some have been here for years. This might be their only shot. He looks around at the faces waiting in the darkness. We go, he says quietly. We make it work. The great escape continues. Now every escape becomes a desperate gamble. Bull goes first again, emerging from the tunnel into the killing zone between the wire and the trees. No cover, just hope and timing. He waits, counts the searchlight sweeps. When the beam passes, he runs, sprint across 10 feet of open ground that feels like a mile. He makes it, disappears into the pine forest. One down, 219 to go. Bushell adjusts the plan. They'll have to time every single escape to the searchlights. Then the air raid sirens start wailing. British bombers somewhere overhead. Every light in the camp goes black. Complete darkness. The timing system they just worked out? Useless. But here's the thing about these men. They adapt. The blackout might actually help. No searchlights means no timing required. Just pure darkness to cover their movements. What seemed like another disaster becomes an opportunity. Sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes the war helps you fight the war. In pitch blackness, the escape takes on an eerie rhythm. Man after man disappears down the tunnel shaft. 300 feet of crawling through a space barely wider than your shoulders. No light, just feel your way forward, foot by foot, breath by breath. The air is thick and stale. Your heart's hammering so loud you're sure the guards can hear it through 30 feet of earth. Then you reach the end, feel cold air on your face. Freedom, 10 feet away. The men keep coming. Bushell goes through 20th, then 30th. Each emergence is a small miracle. Crawl out, stay low, listen for footsteps, voices, anything that means you've been spotted, then run. Sprint for the tree line and disappear into the German forest. By midnight, they have a system down. One man every few minutes. It's working. Slowly, carefully, but it's working. The impossible dream is becoming reality. They're actually doing this. Close calls keep everyone on edge. A guard walks near the tunnel entrance. Everyone freezes, waits, holds their breath until the footsteps fade away. A man gets stuck halfway through the tunnel, panics in the darkness. They talk him through it, calm him down, get him moving again. Every few minutes brings a new crisis, but they handle each one. These aren't just prisoners anymore. They're soldiers again, fighting their war with cunning instead of weapons. March in Germany is bitter cold. These men emerge from their tunnel into a night that cuts right through their stolen civilian clothes. No winter coats, no gloves, just thin jackets and whatever warmth they can generate by moving fast. The forest floor crunches under their feet. Every sound feels amplified in the darkness. But they keep running, keep moving, because cold is temporary. Freedom might be forever. If they can just make it through this night. 40 men through, 50, 60. The operation that seemed doomed when they discovered the tunnel was short, has found its rhythm. Men disappearing into the German night at steady intervals, each one carrying forged papers, stolen clothes, and months of preparation. Some heading for the Baltic ports, others toward Switzerland. A few brave souls aiming for France, all of them knowing that dawn will bring the largest manhunt in German history. But for now, in this darkness, they're winning. 4 a.m. Dawn is still a couple hours away, but time is running short. The tunnel entrance is getting worn down from all the traffic, dirt falling, making noise, and they're running out of the safest hours. The 75th man squeezes through, then the 76th. Wings Day makes it. A pilot who's been planning escape since the day he was shot down. As he disappears into the trees, something magical has happened. 76 Allied airmen have vanished into Nazi Germany. Then a guard discovers the tunnel. Pure bad luck, random patrol. Wrong place, wrong time. He spots the entrance, raises the alarm. Sirens start wailing again. But this time it's not an air raid. It's the end of the Great Escape. Men still waiting in hut 104 hear the commotion and know instantly what's happened. The operation is blown. The tunnel is discovered. But they did it, despite every obstacle, every setback, every piece of bad luck. 76 men are loose in Nazi Germany. Not the 200 they'd planned, but 76 souls who refused to accept captivity, who spent 11 months digging through German sand with stolen spoons and bedboards, who crawled through a tunnel that fell short, and ran across open ground in the searchlight shadows. They're out there somewhere in the darkness, scattered across 1,000 square miles of occupied Europe, and Hitler is about to lose his mind. Chapter 7. A Dawnless Day. By 3 a.m., the phone lines across Nazi Germany are burning. Every police station, every military post, every train depot. The message is identical. 76 Allied prisoners have vanished into the night. This isn't just an escape, it's a catastrophe. And somewhere in Berlin, a very angry Austrian corporal is about to make this personal. The manhunt that's about to unfold will involve every Nazi in uniform, every collaborator, every terrified civilian. Nobody sleeps tonight. The Sagan railway station is chaos. German soldiers everywhere, dogs barking, searchlights sweeping the platforms, and walking straight through this nightmare, 2 men in stolen civilian clothes. Their hearts are hammering so hard, they're sure everyone can hear it. False papers in their pockets, a few German phrases memorized. That's all they've got between freedom and a firing squad. The train to Breslau is boarding, 50 yards away. Might as well be 50 miles. Back at Stalag Luft III, the German commandant is having the worst night of his career. Searchlights flood the compound, guards with machine guns patrol every fence, and in the middle of it all, that damned tunnel entrance. Still open, still mocking him. He knows what this means for his future. Court-martial, disgrace, maybe worse, because somewhere in the Reich Chancellery, the Führer is being briefed about this mess, and Hitler doesn't forgive embarrassment. 20 miles south of the camp, 2 RAF pilots are learning that freedom is terrifying. Every sound in the forest could be death. Every distant voice, every snapping twig. They've been walking for hours in stolen boots that don't fit. Their feet are bleeding. Their stolen clothes are soaked with sweat and fear. But behind them, searchlights still sweep the sky. Hundreds of soldiers still hunt. They keep walking. What choice do they have? In a farmhouse near the Czech border, a Polish pilot sits perfectly still while German voices argue outside. His heart is so loud he's sure they can hear it through the walls. The farmer's wife brought him here, fed him soup, gave him her husband's clothes. Now soldiers are searching every building, every barn, every cellar. He can hear their boots on the wooden porch, getting closer. The door handle turns. This is it. The Breslau train is pulling away from the platform. Inside, 2 escapees finally allow themselves to breathe. They made it past the soldiers, past the dogs, past the checkpoints. For the first time in hours, they almost smile. But through the window, more soldiers at the next station. More dogs. More searchlights. This isn't over. It's just beginning. And somewhere behind them, the manhunt is spreading like wildfire across the Reich. Heinrich Himmler's phone rings at 4 a.m. The Reichsführer SS doesn't appreciate being woken. But when he hears the news, his blood turns to ice. 76 enemy agents loose in the Reichs. Right under their noses, the Gestapo chief knows what comes next. Because when prisoners escape, heads roll, starting with his, unless he finds them first. Every Gestapo office across Germany gets the same message. Find them all, or else, near the Polish border, 3 Canadian airmen huddle in an abandoned shed. They've been running for 8 hours. Their stolen clothes are torn. Their false papers are soggy with sweat. In the distance, they can hear dogs barking, getting closer. One of them whispers what they're all thinking. Maybe they should surrender. At least prisoners get food, get sleep, get to live, but they've come too far to quit now. The railway checkpoint at Dresden is a nightmare of uniforms and suspicion. Every passenger questioned, every paper examined, every face memorized, and walking straight into this trap, 2 more escapees. Their German is terrible. Their story is thin. Their nerves are shot. The Gestapo officer studies their identity cards, takes his time. His eyes never leave their faces. This is the moment. Freedom or death. Nothing in between. By dawn, the manhunt covers half of Germany. Roadblocks on every highway. Soldiers in every forest. Gestapo at every station. It's the biggest security operation since the war began. And the escapees, they're learning what it really means to be hunted. Every civilian could be an informant. Every uniform could be death. Every moment could be their last. The net is closing, and they all know it. In a freight yard outside Munich, 4 airmen hide between the railway cars. They can hear soldiers searching, shouting orders, getting closer. One by one, their hiding spots are discovered, their fellow prisoners dragged away, handcuffed, beaten, thrown into trucks. The net is tightening. The hunt is working. And the math is simple. 76 men scattered across Nazi Germany, thousands of soldiers hunting them. This was never going to end well. The farmer's wife pushes a loaf of bread into the Polish pilot's hands, points toward the forest, whispers, "Schnell," quickly. Through the window she can see the soldiers searching her neighbor's barn. They'll be here next. He knows she's risking everything to help him. Her life, her family, and he knows something else. He probably won't make it. But she's given him a chance. That's all anyone can ask for. The sun is starting to rise over Nazi Germany. After 8 hours of chaos, 8 hours of hunting, 8 hours of terror, and the results are devastating. Most of the 76 are already caught, already in handcuffs, already facing the consequences of their courage. But a few, just a few, are still running, still free, still believing they might actually make it. The question is, how many will see another sunset? Dawn breaks over the Third Reich, and the manhunt enters a new phase. The amateur hour is over. Now come the professionals, the Gestapo, the SS, the ones who turn catching people into an art form. They have photographs now, descriptions, names, and they have something else. Direct orders from the very top. Find them all. No matter what it takes. Because failure isn't an option, and mercy isn't even a consideration. Back in Berlin, the phone rings at the Chancellery. It's past midnight. The duty officer takes the call, scribbles notes, then stares at the paper. This can't be right. 76 prisoners. Gone from Stalag Luft III, the escape-proof camp. He checks the message again. Still the same impossible words. Someone has to wake the Führer, and that someone is not looking forward to this conversation. Because when Adolf Hitler hears about the Great Escape, his rage will be biblical. Hitler's been asleep for maybe 3 hours. He's already in a foul mood these days. The war's not going well. The Allies are closing in from all sides. His Atlantic wall is cracking. And now this. The aide knocks softly, then louder. The door flies open. Hitler appears, hair disheveled, eyes wild with interrupted sleep. The aide hands over the report. Hitler reads it once, twice. His face goes from confusion to disbelief to something much, much worse. The screaming starts immediately. Furniture flies. Papers scatter. How dare they? How dare they embarrass the Reich like this? 76 enemy pilots running loose across Germany, while the world watches and laughs. This isn't just an escape. It's humiliation. It's propaganda gold for the Allies. And Hitler takes this personally, very personally. He paces the room like a caged animal, ranting about incompetence, about making examples, about showing these terrorists what happens when you defy the Third Reich. Then comes the order that will haunt history. Hitler stops pacing. His voice drops to that cold, deliberate tone his inner circle knows and fears. All recaptured prisoners are to be shot. All of them. No exceptions. No trials. No Geneva Convention. Just bullets and unmarked graves. The aide scribbles frantically, hands shaking. He knows what he's writing. He knows what this means. Mass murder. A war crime so blatant it will echo through decades. Here's the thing about the Geneva Convention. It exists for a reason. Captured military personnel aren't supposed to be murdered. They're prisoners of war. Protected. Even if they escape, even if they're recaptured, you don't just line them up and shoot them. That's not war. That's butchery. But Hitler doesn't care about conventions or international law. He cares about sending a message written in blood that says, "Defy us and die." The order travels down the chain of command, first to Himmler's SS headquarters, then to regional Gestapo offices, then to local commanders across occupied Europe. And at each stop, someone has to read those words. Someone has to process what they're being asked to do. Murder 76 prisoners in cold blood. Some of these officers are soldiers, career military men who still believe in honor, even in wartime, and they're horrified. General Adolf Westhoff gets the order at Luftwaffe headquarters. He reads it 3 times, hoping he's misunderstood. He hasn't. His aide asks what's wrong. Westhoff looks up, ashen-faced. They want us to murder prisoners of war, not execute, not eliminate, murder, because that's what this is. And Westhoff knows that if Germany loses this war, and they're going to lose this war, someone will answer for this. Someone will hang for following this order. So the negotiations begin, behind closed doors, whispered phone calls, careful words that dance around the central horror of what's being discussed. How do you bargain down a genocide? How do you negotiate mass murder? But that's exactly what's happening. Some commanders refuse outright. Others suggest alternatives. House arrest. Solitary confinement. Anything but executions. The number starts dropping. 76, 60, 50. Each number represents a human life hanging in the balance of bureaucratic horror. General von Gravenitz calls it impossible to carry out. Colonel Welder suggests it would cause serious complications. These are careful words, diplomatic language. What they really mean is, we won't mass murder prisoners for your propaganda stunt, but Hitler's not backing down completely. Fine, not all 76, but 50. 50 will die. 50 examples, 50 terror murders to show the world what happens when you escape from Nazi Germany. And somehow, in the twisted logic of war, 50 sounds like compromise. Think about that for a second. 50 human beings, 50 sons, husbands, fathers, 50 men who woke up that morning not knowing they'd been marked for death by a madman's tantrum. Roger Bushell's in a train car somewhere, probably feeling proud of what they accomplished. Squadron Leader Tim Wallen's walking through a German forest, tasting freedom for the first time in years. None of them know. None of them have any idea what's coming. The families back home don't know either. Bushell's mother in South Africa, still getting his censored letters from camp. Parents in Britain and Canada and Australia, praying their boys stay safe behind prisoner of war wire. They think capture is the worst thing that could happen. They're wrong, because now being recaptured means death. Not the clean death of aerial combat, not the heroic death of a dogfight, just a bullet in the back of the head in some anonymous German field. The weight of this decision settles over everyone involved. The German officers who'll carry out the murders, the Gestapo agents who'll pull the triggers, the camp commandants who'll receive the urns full of ashes. Even the clerks typing up the death certificates know they're part of something monstrous. Some will refuse, some will find excuses, some will follow orders and spend the rest of their lives trying to forget, but the order stands. 50 will die. Meanwhile, across occupied Europe, the manhunt continues. Police checkpoints, identity sweeps, roadblocks and searches. 76 Allied airmen scattered across a continent, most of them walking straight into the arms of their executioners. They don't know about Hitler's order. They don't know that recapture no longer means returning to camp. They think they're playing the same old game of cat and mouse. They're wrong. The rules just changed, and death is now the penalty for courage. This is the moment the Great Escape transforms from adventure story to tragedy, from daring breakout to war crime. 50 good men are about to die, not because of military necessity or battlefield tactics, but because one psychopath couldn't stand being embarrassed. Their names will be remembered. Their murders will be investigated. Justice will eventually come. But right now, in the spring of 1944, 50 families are about to lose everything, and they don't even know it yet. Chapter 9. Breach of Geneva Convention. The executions begin. Hitler's order is clear. No survivors, but his commanders push back. Goering argues. Himmler calculates. Even hardened SS officers know this. Crosses a line that can't be uncrossed. The Geneva Convention exists for a reason. Prisoners of war aren't supposed to be murdered for doing their duty. But Hitler doesn't care about conventions, or consequences, or the fact that German pilots might face the same fate if captured. 50 men must die. The Gestapo gets the list. Roger Bushell sits in a Gestapo car outside Sagan. 3 days of freedom. 3 days where he tasted something he hadn't felt in 4 years. Possibility. Now handcuffed. Heading back to what he thinks is interrogation. Maybe solitary confinement. Bread and water. He's calculating his story. What to admit. What to deny. How to protect the others still out there. He doesn't know he's already dead. Doesn't know his name topped Hitler's personal kill list. The car turns away from Stalag Luft III. Wrong direction. The first murders happen quietly. Small towns, back roads, men taken from local jails where they'd been held after recapture. The Gestapo has their methods. Always the same story afterward. Shot while attempting to escape. Always the same lie. The urns start arriving at Stalag Luft III within days. Small wooden boxes, ashes where living, breathing men used to be. The commandant signs the receipts. His hands shake. Even he knows this is butchery. Even he knows the war is already lost. Squadron Leader James Catanach, 26 years old, Australian, captured over France in 1941. 3 years in the bag. 3 years of planning this moment. 3 years of dreaming about Sydney Harbour and his girl back home. The Gestapo picks him up near the Czech border, 40 miles from freedom. They drive him to a patch of woods outside Hirschberg. Tell him to get out, to run. Catanach knows what this is. He doesn't run, dies standing still, shot in the back anyway. Flight Lieutenant Rupert Kirath, South African, 25 years old. His crime, helping forge identity papers for men he'd never see again. Spent months hunched over tiny details, signatures, stamps, the kind of work that ruins your eyes but might save someone's life. The Gestapo collects him from a prison in Breslau. His murder gets filed under administrative action. No trial, no charges, no last words recorded. Just a man who helped his friends disappear and then disappeared himself. The forger's final masterpiece, making himself invisible. Back at the camp, the remaining prisoners start doing the math. Every urn that arrives is a name crossed off the missing list. Every death notice is a friend who won't walk through those gates again. They're keeping score now, not of escapes or recaptures, of executions, of how many men Hitler murdered for the crime of trying to go home. The number keeps climbing. 10, 20, 30. The Geneva Convention becomes a bad joke. International law, Hitler's wiping his arse with it. Flight Lieutenant Edgar Humphreys, Welsh, 31 years old, 2 kids back home he's never met. His wife sends letters to Stalag Luft III every month. Photos of the children growing up. He keeps them in his breast pocket during the escape. When the Gestapo shoots him outside Munich, the photos are still there, covered in blood now. 2 children who'll grow up wondering why their father never came home, why the last letter from the War Office arrived with such terrible news. Another family destroyed by Hitler's revenge. Here's what gets me about this whole nightmare. These weren't combatants anymore. They were prisoners. Captured airmen who'd done their duty and ended up behind wire. The Geneva Convention protected them for good reason. Shoot a pilot in combat, that's war. Execute him in captivity for trying to escape. That's murder, plain and simple. Hitler knew it. Himmler knew it. Every Gestapo agent pulling the trigger knew it. They did it anyway. 50 times. 50 men who deserved to see their families again. Roger Bushell's murder happens near Görlitz, the man who dreamed up the whole operation, the Big X himself. 3.5 years of planning, months of digging, hundreds of men working toward one impossible goal. And it almost worked. 76 men got out. That's 76 more than the Germans thought possible. But Bushell won't live to see the war end, won't see justice served, won't know that his great escape becomes legend, dies believing he failed. He didn't. He just didn't get to find out. The lies pile up like cordwood. Shot while attempting to escape. Every single report. Same phrase, same fabrication. As if 50 trained pilots all decided to make a break for it at the exact moment their Gestapo handlers were ready to shoot. As if men who'd survived years of captivity suddenly lost their minds and charged machine guns. The paperwork is meticulous. The fiction is absurd. But dead men don't file complaints. Dead men don't testify at war crimes tribunals. Or so the Germans think. Flight Lieutenant Gordon Kidder, Canadian, 27 years old. His specialty was making compasses from melted phonograph records. Tiny instruments that could mean the difference between freedom and recapture, between life and death. Hours of precision work by candlelight, steady hands creating navigation tools from scraps of junk. The Gestapo executes him near Olders. His compass-making kit gets thrown in a ditch. Tools that guided men toward home, abandoned in German mud. Another craftsman silenced. Another friend murdered for Hitler's pride. The urns keep coming. Small wooden boxes delivered like groceries, each one representing years of friendship, shared meals of thin soup and stale bread, conversations about home, plans for after the war, dreams that will never happen now. The camp commandant stops making eye contact with the Allied senior officers. Even he's ashamed. Even he knows this butchery serves no military purpose. It's just murder dressed up in official paperwork. 50 men reduced to ashes because one madman couldn't stand losing, couldn't stand being outsmarted. Squadron Leader Tom Leigh, New Zealander, 26 years old. His job was intelligence gathering, watching guard patterns, timing shift changes, learning which Germans could be bribed and which ones couldn't. Information that kept other men alive during tunnel operations. The Gestapo shoots him outside Breslau, files his death under security matters. No trial, no defense, no chance to explain that he was just trying to do his duty, just trying to escape lawful captivity, like every POW manual said he should. Another intelligence officer who won't be debriefing anyone. 50 names, 50 urns, 50 families who'll get telegrams instead of homecomings. The Great Escape's final toll isn't measured in tunnels dug or miles travelled or borders crossed. It's measured in good men murdered for doing what soldiers are supposed to do. Never stop trying to fight your way home. Hitler thought he was ending the story, thought he was erasing the humiliation. Instead, he guaranteed these 50 men would be remembered forever. Their deaths became the war crime that wouldn't be forgotten or forgiven. Chapter 10. Returning Home, the Tragic Turn. 3 weeks after the escape, Stalag Luft III feels different, quieter. The Germans aren't saying much, but their faces. Something's wrong, really wrong. Word filters back slowly, bits and pieces. A prisoner here, another there, some recaptured, some still running, but the numbers don't add up. 76 men escaped that night. Where are they? The silence from the outside world grows heavier each day. And then, the first terrible whisper reaches the barracks. It starts as rumors, always does in places like this. Someone heard something from a guard. Another guy overheard the Germans talking. Maybe a dozen recaptured. Maybe more. But the stories keep changing, getting darker, and there's this feeling. You know that feeling when you know bad news is coming, but nobody wants to say it out loud. That's what's hanging over the camp now, heavy and thick, men walking around with questions they're afraid to ask. Questions about friends who should be home by now. April 18th, 3.5 weeks after the escape. The camp commandant calls an assembly. His face is stone, no emotion. Just facts, he says. Delivered like a grocery list. 76 prisoners escaped. 3 made it to freedom. 23 returned to prison camps. And 50 have been shot while trying to escape. Shot while trying to escape. That's the phrase he uses, over and over. Like saying it enough times makes it true, makes it legal. The prisoners stand there, stunned. 50 men. The silence after that announcement, it's not just quiet, it's hollow. Men looking at each other, trying to process what they just heard. 50 executions? That's not how this works. That's not how prisoner of war conventions work. You capture escaped prisoners. You put them in solitary. You don't execute them. But the commandant's words hang in the air, shot while trying to escape. Everyone knows what that really means. Everyone knows this is murder, state-sanctioned murder. And they're all thinking the same thing. Who? The Geneva Convention is supposed to protect prisoners of war. Everyone knows this. The Germans know this. But Hitler's personal order overrode everything. 50 Allied airmen murdered in cold blood, not killed in combat, not shot while actually escaping, taken to remote locations and executed. This is what happens when ideology trumps international law. When one man's rage becomes policy. The prisoners in Stalag Luft III are staring at evidence that the rules no longer apply, that their lives mean nothing to the Nazi high command. Now comes the waiting, the worst part. Names. They need names. Who made it out? Who's in other camps? And who's never coming back? The camp goes quiet in a way it's never been quiet before. Men sitting on their bunks, staring at nothing, thinking about friends who climbed down into Tunnel Harry that night. Friends who might be on that list of 50. Friends who might be ash in an urn somewhere. The uncertainty eats at them. Not knowing is almost worse than knowing. The names come slowly, like drops of poison. Roger Bushell, the mastermind himself. Shot. Johnny Bull, the Canadian tunnel expert. Shot. Bob Stanford Tuck, the fighter ace everyone loved. Shot. Each name hits the camp like a physical blow. These weren't just fellow prisoners. They were leaders, friends, the best of them. And the Germans made sure to target the best, the ones who inspired others, the ones who gave everyone hope. Gone. All of them gone. There's something particularly cruel about how the Gestapo carried this out. They didn't just kill these men, they made sure their deaths would terrorize everyone left behind. 50 murders. Not quick battlefield deaths. Calculated executions designed to send a message. This is what happens when you defy the Reich. This is what happens when you embarrass Hitler. The psychological warfare is as deliberate as the physical murders. Break the survivor's will. Make them too afraid to try again. Then the urns arrive. Small, simple wooden boxes. 50 of them. Each one containing what's left of a man who dared to seek freedom. The German guards load them onto trucks with mechanical efficiency. No ceremony, no respect, just cargo to be delivered. But for the prisoners watching from behind barbed wire, each box represents a friend, a leader, a brother in arms. The physical weight of those urns, it's nothing compared to the emotional weight crushing the camp. The procession into camp is heartbreaking. German guards carrying urns like they're delivering mail. No dignity, no honor, just bureaucratic efficiency. But the prisoners, they line up along the paths, standing at attention, saluting, giving their murdered friends the respect the Nazis refused them. It's spontaneous. Nobody ordered it. Nobody organized it. Just hundreds of men honoring 50 who died for the simple dream of going home. The silence is profound, sacred even. In this hell, dignity survives. Individual grief hits different than collective mourning. Each man processes the loss in his own way. Some rage, some weep, some go completely silent. The ones who knew Bushell personally, they're gutted. He was supposed to make it. If anyone could pull off the impossible, it was Roger. But even the most brilliant escape artist couldn't outrun Hitler's personal vendetta. The randomness of who lived and who died haunts everyone. Why these 50? Why not others? There's no logic to survival. The entire atmosphere of Stalag Luft III changes after the urns arrive. Before, there was always this undercurrent of hope, men planning, scheming, dreaming of escape. Now there's fear mixed with the hope, real fear, not just of capture anymore. Fear of execution, of never seeing home again. The Great Escape was supposed to be about freedom. Instead, it became about martyrdom. 50 men died to prove a point about Nazi brutality. Their sacrifice wouldn't be forgotten. For the survivors, guilt becomes another prison. Why them? Why did they live when better men died? Some feel guilty for not escaping that night. Others feel guilty for wanting to try again. The psychological scars run deep. These aren't just prisoners of war anymore. They're witnesses to war crimes, survivors of a massacre, and they carry that weight for the rest of their lives. Every day in that camp becomes a memorial to the 50 who died. But something else emerges from this tragedy. Determination. Not just to survive, but to remember, to make sure the world knows what happened here. That 50 Allied airmen were murdered for daring to seek freedom, that the Geneva Convention was shredded by Nazi ideology. These survivors become living testimony. Their mission now goes beyond escape. It becomes about justice, about ensuring these deaths mean something, about making sure history remembers both the courage and the cost. Chapter 11. Defiance amidst despair. The urns arrived on a grey morning in late May, 50 small ceramic containers, each one holding the ashes of a man who'd crawled through Harry Tunnel just 2 months earlier. The camp commandant delivered them personally, his face stone, no ceremony, no explanation, just 50 urns lined up on wooden tables in the main compound. And that's when it hit the remaining prisoners. This wasn't just murder, this was a message. Hitler wanted them broken. Wing Commander Harry Day stared at the urns and felt something crack inside his chest. Bushell was gone. Dennis Cochran, gone. Tim Wallen, Gordon Brattell, all of them, gone. Executed, shot in the back of the head by Gestapo agents who'd never even seen combat. Day's hands shook. Not from fear, from rage. Pure, white-hot rage. Because he knew exactly what the Nazis wanted. They wanted the survivors to give up, to stop planning escapes, to accept their cage. Well, fuck that. The silence in the compound was deafening. 2,000 Allied airmen, and you could hear a pin drop. Some men wept openly, others just stared. A few walked away, unable to process what those urns represented. But here's what the Gestapo didn't understand about these particular prisoners. They weren't just soldiers, they were bomber crews, fighter pilots, men who'd already stared death in the face every single day for years, and they had a very specific relationship with loss. Squadron Leader Jimmy James approached the urns slowly. His own escape had failed just hours after Bushell's. Pure luck he wasn't in one of those containers. He picked up the urn marked R. Bushell and held it against his chest. Roger had saved his life once, back in 1942, pulled him from a burning Spitfire over France. Now this. James closed his eyes and made a promise, not to the dead, to himself. The bastards wanted them broken. They'd chosen the wrong fucking airmen. Word spread through the barracks like wildfire. Not panic, purpose. Within hours, new escape committees were forming, quietly, carefully, but forming nonetheless. Flight Lieutenant Sidney Dowse pulled out pencils and paper, started sketching. Another tunnel? Maybe? Fence cutting? Possible. The specifics didn't matter yet. What mattered was this. 50 good men had died refusing to accept their cages. Their sacrifice demanded an answer. And that answer wasn't submission. It was more defiance. Louder defiance. Smarter defiance. The German guards watched nervously as small groups of prisoners gathered throughout the compound. They'd expected broken men, defeated men. Instead, they saw something far more dangerous. Men with nothing left to lose and everything left to prove. Colonel Lucius Clay noticed the change immediately. The way prisoners walked, talked, looked at their captors. The executions hadn't crushed their spirit. They'd forged it into something harder, something unbreakable. And Clay knew the Nazis had just made their biggest mistake yet. That night, in Hut 104, 20 men sat in a circle on the floor. No formal meeting, No official agenda, just 20 survivors who needed to say something out loud. Flight Lieutenant John Weir spoke first. His voice barely a whisper. They killed Bushell because he wouldn't break, wouldn't give up, wouldn't accept that we belonged in cages. The others nodded. Then Weir's voice got stronger. So we don't break either. We don't give up. We don't accept these fucking cages. The memorial service was held 3 days later. Unofficial, of course. The Germans wouldn't allow anything formal, but 2,000 men gathered in the compound anyway. No chaplain, no ceremony, just men honoring men. Wing Commander Day read the names, all 50 of them, each name followed by complete silence. Then, when the last name was spoken, something extraordinary happened. 2,000 voices, speaking as one. We will remember them. Not a prayer, a vow. The psychological warfare went both ways. German guards started avoiding eye contact with prisoners. The ferrets stopped their enthusiastic tunnel hunting. Even Commandant Oberstbrauner seemed rattled. He'd expected the executions to solve his escape problem. Instead, his intelligence reports showed more suspicious activity than ever. Prisoners weren't cowering. They were organizing, planning, and the guards knew it. 50 dead heroes had created something far more dangerous than 50 living prisoners. They'd created martyrs. Letters home became exercises in coded defiance. Families across Britain, America, Canada, and Poland received messages that seemed normal on the surface. Weather's been challenging lately, but we're keeping our spirits up. Lost some good friends recently, but their memory keeps us strong. Don't worry about us giving up. That's not happening. The censors missed it completely, but the families understood. Their boys weren't broken. 50 executions hadn't been enough. The cages still wouldn't hold. New escape plans emerged within weeks. Smaller, smarter, harder to detect. The mass breakout strategy was dead with Harry Tunnel, but the individual attempts, the wire cutting, the guard bribing, the uniform stealing, that was just getting started. Every successful escape, no matter how brief, was a middle finger to the Gestapo, a reminder that murdering 50 men hadn't solved their problem. It had multiplied it, made it personal, made it sacred. By summer's end, the dynamic in Stalag Luft III had fundamentally changed. The prisoners weren't just POWs anymore. They were brothers in arms with 50 dead comrades. Every failed escape attempt was honored. Every small act of defiance celebrated. Every day they refused to be broken was a victory. The Germans had tried to use fear as a weapon. Instead, they'd forged something far more dangerous. A community united by loss and strengthened by purpose. The final irony? Hitler's mass execution order had been designed to stop escapes forever, to make an example so brutal that no POW would ever try again. But it had the opposite effect. By the war's end, Stalag Luft III recorded more escape attempts per capita than any other German prison camp, not because the men were reckless, because they'd learned something the Nazis never understood. The human spirit doesn't break under pressure. It crystallizes. It becomes diamond hard, unbreakable. Years later, survivors would struggle to explain what kept them going after the urns arrived. How do you honor friends who died for something as simple as freedom? How do you carry their sacrifice without being crushed by its weight? The answer, they discovered, was surprisingly simple. You refuse to give the bastards what they want. You keep planning, keep hoping, keep fighting, because the alternative isn't just surrendering your own freedom. It's surrendering theirs too. Chapter 12. The Lucky Three. Escape to freedom. 3 men, out of 76 who crawled through Harry that March night. Only 3 would taste freedom, while 50 of their friends faced execution squads. While 23 others rotted in concentration camps, these 3 kept moving, kept believing, kept running towards something that seemed impossible. Their names? Per Bergsland, Jens Müller, Bram van der Stok, Norwegian, Dutch. And their story, well, it's the one bright thread in this dark tapestry. Let's start with Bergsland and Müller, 2 Norwegian pilots who'd been shot down over occupied Europe. They spoke German. Crucial detail. When they emerged from that tunnel, short of the tree line, they didn't panic. They walked calmly, like 2 Luftwaffe officers heading back to base after a night in town. Confidence. That's what saved them in those first critical hours. While others scattered into the woods, these 2 strolled past German guards, nodded, smiled, and kept walking toward the railway station. Van der Stok went solo. Dutch pilot, medical background. He'd been planning this moment for months, had memorized train schedules, knew which routes avoided major checkpoints. While other escapees were getting caught at railway stations within hours, Van der Stock was already 300 miles south, moving through the night, sleeping in barns, eating stolen potatoes. His plan? Get to Switzerland. Neutral territory. Just had to cross half of Nazi Germany first. No big deal, right? The man had nerves of steel. Here's what's wild about their escape timing. The air raid sirens that night. Pure luck. When those alarms started wailing, German guards abandoned their posts. Searchlights went dark. Everyone dove for cover. Our three lucky bastards used that chaos. Bergsland and Müller caught a freight train heading north. Van der Stock found a bicycle. A bicycle, can you imagine? Pedaling through occupied Germany on a stolen bike. But that's exactly what desperate men do. They improvise, they adapt, they survive. The Norwegians had one massive advantage. They were heading home, north to Sweden. Through territory they understood. Forest paths their grandfathers had walked. They knew which berries were safe to eat, which streams ran clean, how to read weather in the cloud formations. Van der Stock, he was navigating by stolen maps and pure instinct. South through Bavaria, through the heart of Nazi Germany. Every checkpoint a potential death sentence. Every conversation a roll of the dice. Yet he kept going, kept believing in something impossible. Day 3. Bergsland and Müller reached the Swedish border. But here's the thing about borders during wartime. They're not lines on maps. They're minefields, guard posts, barbed wire, dogs. These two Norwegian pilots spent 12 hours crawling on their bellies, inch by inch, through mud and melting snow, listening for patrols, watching for tripwires. Freedom was literally 50 yards away. Might as well have been 50 miles. One wrong move, and boom, game over. Story ends in a minefield, not a debriefing room. Van der Stock's luck came in the form of an old woman. Somewhere outside Munich he was starving, hadn't eaten in 2 days, stumbled into this farm, and instead of screaming for the Gestapo, she fed him. Soup, bread, real food. Why? Her son was a pilot too, shot down over England. She was hoping someone, somewhere, was being kind to her boy. War makes strange angels of ordinary people. That soup probably saved his life. Gave him strength for the mountain crossing ahead. The Norwegians made it first, March 30th, 1944, 6 days after crawling out of Harry. They crossed into Sweden, collapsed in a railway station, and immediately contacted British intelligence. Meanwhile, Van der Stock was still deep in enemy territory, still cycling south, still betting his life on forged papers and a half-decent German accent. The Norwegians were free, safe, but their joy? Tempered by the question haunting them. What happened to the other 73? Where were Bushell and the boys? Still running, or already caught? Van der Stock's route took him through the Alps. March in the mountains. Snow, ice, altitude sickness. He was a pilot, sure, but this wasn't flying. This was pure endurance. His stolen bicycle became useless on those mountain passes. So he walked, climbed, slept in caves when he could find them, under trees when he couldn't, eating snow for water, following smugglers' paths that might lead to freedom or might lead straight into a German patrol. Every step was a gamble with death. April 15th, 3 weeks after the escape, Van der Stock finally reaches the Swiss border, but crossing into neutral territory, not as simple as stepping over a line. Swiss guards were jumpy, trigger-happy. They'd shoot first, ask questions later, so Van der Stock did something brilliant. He found a busy border crossing, mingled with regular travellers, German workers heading home, Swiss citizens returning from business trips, walked right through the checkpoint like he belonged there. Sometimes the best hiding place is plain sight. Freedom tastes like Swiss coffee and clean sheets. That's what all three men remembered years later. The Norwegians in Stockholm, Van der Stock in Bern. That first night of real safety. No guards, no roll calls, no searchlights sweeping the compound. But also, no friends, no familiar voices. The silence of survival can be deafening. They'd made it. They were alive, but they were also alone, wondering about the men they'd left behind. The men who weren't so lucky. The men who'd paid the ultimate price. The debriefings were brutal in their own way. Intelligence officers asking endless questions. What did you see? Who helped you? What routes did you take? But the question that haunted all three, what happened to the others? Why haven't more escapees made it to safety? The officers wouldn't say, couldn't say. Not yet. Not until the full scope of Hitler's revenge became clear. For now, they were heroes. Survivors. Living proof that the Great Escape wasn't a complete failure. 3 men had beaten the odds. Van der Stock eventually made it back to England. rejoined his squadron, flew more missions. The Norwegians returned to their units too, but none of them were quite the same. How could they be? They'd crawled through hell and come out the other side. They'd tasted freedom while their friends tasted death. Survivor's guilt is real, heavy, it follows you home, sits at your dinner table, whispers questions in the dark. Why me? Why did I make it when Bushell didn't? When 50 good men didn't? But here's what their survival meant. Beyond the personal cost, beyond the guilt, these 3 men were living witnesses. Proof that Bushell's plan could work. Proof that the Great Escape wasn't just a noble failure, it was a partial success. And in wartime, partial success is still victory. 3 men reached freedom. 3 men lived to tell the story. 3 men proved that even Hitler's most secure prison couldn't hold the unbreakable human spirit. Sometimes 3 is enough. Sometimes 3 men can carry the hopes of 76. Chapter 13. War's End. The Hunt for Justice. May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe Day. Church bells ringing across Britain. Dancing in the streets. But in RAF offices across London, men in uniform aren't celebrating. They're reading reports from liberated POW camps. Reports about 50 murdered airmen. About Gestapo execution squads. About Hitler's rage turned lethal. And these men? They're making a promise. Every single Nazi who pulled those triggers. Every official who gave those orders. They're going to find them all. The RAF had a problem. War crimes investigators were already stretched thin across Europe. Concentration camps to document, mass graves to excavate, war criminals to track down. But the Great Escape murders, these weren't random atrocities. This was personal. 50 RAF aircrew, shot in cold blood, prisoners of war, protected by Geneva Convention. This demanded something special, something focused, something relentless. Wing Commander Wilfred Bowes got the call. Form a unit, hunt them down. No statute of limitations, no mercy. Bowes hand-picked his team, former intelligence officers. Fluent German speakers. Men who understood both military law and criminal investigation. They called themselves the RAF Special Investigation Branch, headquartered in Bad Oeynhausen, occupied Germany. Their mission files? Thick manila folders, each one containing everything they knew about 50 separate murders, names, dates, locations. And somewhere in the chaos of defeated Germany, the killers were still out there, still breathing, still thinking they'd gotten away with it. The challenge was staggering. Germany in ruins, cities flattened, records destroyed, millions of displaced persons wandering the roads, Nazi officials burning documents, changing identities, disappearing into the rubble, and the Gestapo men who'd murdered the 50. They knew what was coming. They'd scattered across Europe, false papers, new names, some hiding in plain sight, others fleeing to South America. But Bowes and his team had something the killers didn't expect: time, patience, and an absolute refusal to give up. They started with the urns, those ceramic containers that had arrived at Stalag Luft III in 1944, each one supposedly containing the ashes of an executed escapee. But the investigators noticed something: inconsistencies. Different pottery, different crematoriums. The Nazis had been sloppy. Each urn told a story. Each one pointed to a specific location, a specific Gestapo office, a specific murder squad. Slowly, methodically, the investigators began mapping the killing network, name by name, unit by unit. The net was closing. The first breakthrough came from an unlikely source, a German secretary who'd worked for the Gestapo in Breslau. She remembered typing execution orders, remembered the names, remembered her boss bragging about solving the escape problem permanently. She was terrified. War crimes trials were happening everywhere. Nuremberg was front-page news. She made a deal, information for immunity. Within weeks, the investigators had their first real targets: names, faces, last known addresses. The manhunt was about to get very real. Hans Ziegler thought he was safe, former Gestapo officer. New identity, working as a farmhand in Bavaria. American zone, nobody asking questions. Then the RAF investigators showed up at his door. They had witnesses, documents, his own signature on execution orders. Ziegler broke immediately, confessed to everything, named his accomplices, described the orders from Berlin, admitted to personally shooting 2 RAF officers near a forest road. His confession opened floodgates. Suddenly, everyone was talking, everyone was naming names, everyone was trying to save themselves. By 1946, the investigators had arrested dozens of suspects: Gestapo officers, SS men, local police who'd helped with the murders. They were held in British-run prisons across Germany, interrogated relentlessly, cross-referenced against each other's testimonies. The stories that emerged were horrifying. Men taken from prison cells and told they were being transferred, driven to remote locations, shot in the back of the head, bodies burned or buried in unmarked graves, all on direct orders from Hitler himself. All completely illegal under international law. October 1947, Hamburg. The British military court convened for the Great Escape murder trials. 18 defendants in the dock. The evidence was overwhelming. Signed orders, witness testimony, confessions from co-conspirators. But the defense tried every trick, following orders, wartime necessity, fear of court-martial if they'd refused. The prosecution wasn't buying it. These weren't soldiers in combat. These were cold-blooded executions of defenseless prisoners. The Geneva Convention was clear. No exceptions, no excuses, no mercy for the merciless. The verdicts came down like hammer blows. Guilty, guilty, guilty. 14 defendants convicted of war crimes. Multiple counts of murder, violation of international law. Sentences ranged from prison terms to death. But it was the death sentences that made headlines. 13 men condemned to hang. The same 13 who'd personally pulled triggers on defenseless RAF officers. The courtroom was packed with reporters, former POWs, families of the murdered men. When the judge read the final sentence, you could hear grown men crying, "Justice, finally." Hameln Prison, December 1947. The gallows were ready. One by one the condemned men walked to their deaths. Hans Ziegler, Wilhelm Scharpwinkel, Emil Schultz. 13 names, 13 necks snapped, 13 bodies cut down. The same men who'd murdered 50 RAF aircrews were now dead themselves, their bodies buried in unmarked graves. No ceremonies, no honours, just darkness and silence. The circle was complete. The debt was paid. The 50 had been avenged. Not revenge, justice. Cold, hard, legal justice. Wing Commander Bose filed his final report in early 1948. Mission accomplished. Of the approximately 80 Gestapo officers and officials involved in the Great Escape murders, they'd tracked down and prosecuted dozens, 13 executed, others imprisoned. Some had died during the war. A few had genuinely vanished without trace, but the message was clear. You could run from Allied justice, but you couldn't hide forever. The RAF had kept its promise. The 50 had not died unavenged. Their sacrifice had meaning. Their memory was honoured. The Great Escape trials became landmark cases in international law, proof that following orders was no defence for war crimes. Proof that even in wartime there were lines you didn't cross. Prisoners of war were protected, period. The 50 men who died weren't just escape artists anymore. They were martyrs to a principle, that courage matters, that resistance matters, that even in the darkest times, some things are worth dying for. Their names were carved in stone, their story told to future generations. Roger Bushell never lived to see justice served. Shot by the roadside near Sagan, March 1944, but his legacy lived on in every trial, every conviction, every execution of his murderers. The man who dreamed of tunneling to freedom had achieved something greater. He'd proven that tyranny always falls, that evil always faces judgment, that courage echoes through generations. The Great Escape ended in tragedy, but it also ended in triumph. Justice delayed, but never denied. The 50 were home, finally, forever, at peace. Chapter 14. Echoes from the Past. 1945. Germany surrenders. The camps are liberated. The world sees the full horror of what happened. But for the families of the 50 murdered airmen, surrender isn't enough. Someone has to answer for what happened to their sons. Someone has to pay for those urns that came back to Stalag Luft III. The Geneva Convention was shredded. Men were murdered in cold blood. And now comes the reckoning. The hunt for justice is about to begin. The Royal Air Force doesn't forget its own. Within months of victory, they're assembling something unprecedented, the Special Investigation Branch. Their mission? Track down every Nazi who put a bullet in an escaped prisoner, every Gestapo agent, every SS officer, every local cop who helped. This isn't about vengeance. This is about justice, and they're going to follow the trail no matter where it leads, even if it takes years, even if some of these killers are already wearing new faces, new names. Squadron Leader Francis McKenna leads the investigation. Former lawyer, now detective. He's got a team of translators, interrogators, forensic experts. They're scouring a continent in ruins, tracking down witnesses, following paper trails through bombed-out government buildings, interviewing survivors who saw the executions happen. Some leads go nowhere, others lead straight to men who thought they'd gotten away with murder. The net is closing, and McKenna's team is patient, very, very patient. Justice doesn't have an expiration date. Here's what they discover. The murders weren't random. They weren't heat-of-the-moment killings. These were planned executions. Lists were drawn up, orders were signed, transport was arranged. The Gestapo treated it like paperwork, just another day at the office. McKenna's team finds the documents, the signatures, the testimony from locals who heard the shots in the woods. One by one, they're building cases, rock-solid cases, because when they finally get these men in court, there can't be any doubt. 1947, Hamburg, Germany. The courtroom fills with ghosts. Not literally, but you can feel them there, 50 airmen who should be testifying instead of lying in graves across Europe. The military tribunal convenes. British judges, British law, British justice. 18 defendants sit in the dock, some defiant, some broken, all of them about to learn that the war might be over, but the reckoning has just begun. The evidence McKenna's team gathered, it's overwhelming, damning, undeniable. These men killed prisoners of war in cold blood. The testimonies are devastating. Local farmers describe hearing gunshots in remote woods. German civilians recall convoys of black cars disappearing down forest roads. Fellow Gestapo agents, now desperate to save themselves, spill everything they know. The defendants try every defense in the book, following orders, wartime conditions, military necessity. The judges aren't buying it. The Geneva Convention was clear. Prisoners of war don't get executed for trying to escape. These weren't soldiers making split-second decisions. These were calculated murders, and everyone in this courtroom knows it. The verdicts come down like thunder. Guilty, guilty, guilty. 18 men convicted of war crimes. The sentences vary, but 13 of them, 13 get the death penalty. The courtroom erupts. Some families of the murdered airmen are there, watching justice finally being served. Others couldn't make the journey, couldn't bear to see the faces of the men who killed their sons. But they know, word travels fast. The men who murdered 50 airmen are going to pay with their own lives, an eye for an eye. The condemned men appeal. Of course they do. They petition for clemency. They claim they were just following orders, that they were victims too. The British review every case carefully. This isn't about revenge, it's about justice. And justice demands that war crimes have consequences. The appeals are denied. The sentences stand. 13 men who thought they'd never face judgment for what they did in those dark woods are running out of time. The scaffolds are being built. The execution dates are set. There's nowhere left to run. Hameln Prison, 1948. The executions begin. One by one, the men who killed Roger Bushell and 49 others face the hangman. Some go quietly, others break down completely. A few still claim innocence right to the end. But the evidence was clear. The testimonies were damning. Justice isn't always pretty, but it's necessary. 13 necks snap, 13 bodies drop, 13 families lose someone they loved. But 50 families finally have closure. Their sons have been avenged. The score is settled. Not everyone faces justice. Some of the killers escape. They flee to South America, hide behind new identities, disappear into the chaos of post-war Europe. Others die before they can be caught. Natural deaths that deny their victims' families the satisfaction of seeing them in the dock. It's frustrating. Incomplete. But 13 executions send a message that echoes across the continent. War crimes have consequences. Murder has consequences. Even if it takes years, even if you think you've gotten away with it, justice will find you eventually. The families of the 50 receive letters, official notification that their sons' killers have paid for their crimes. Some find peace in this. Others say it doesn't bring their boys back, doesn't fill the empty chairs at Christmas dinner. They're right, of course. Justice can't resurrect the dead, but it can honor them. It can say that their lives mattered, that their sacrifice meant something, that the world won't just shrug and move on when evil wins around. Sometimes that's all you can do. Sometimes that has to be enough. The trials establish something important, that there are lines you don't cross. Even in war, that following orders isn't a blank check for murder. That prisoners of war have rights, and those rights aren't suggestions. The men who died trying to escape Stalag Luft III, they died for freedom. The men who executed them died for murder. The difference matters. History remembers the difference. And maybe, just maybe, The next officer who gets an illegal order will remember these 13 executions and think twice before obeying. Years pass, decades. The survivors of the Great Escape grow old, then die. The families of the 50 move on with their lives, carrying their grief quietly. The 13 executed Nazis become footnotes in history books, but the principle endures, that courage deserves honor, that sacrifice deserves remembrance, that murder deserves punishment. Roger Bushell and his men didn't escape Nazi Germany, but their story escaped, their example escaped, their refusal to give up, to stop fighting, to accept captivity that escaped and lives on. March 24th comes around every year. Some people remember what it means. The night 76 men crawled out of Tunnel Harry into freedom, and 50 of them crawled straight into their graves. But they chose their fate. They knew the risks and went anyway. That choice echoes down through history. It whispers to everyone who faces impossible odds that sometimes you fight because fighting is right. Sometimes you resist because resistance matters. Sometimes you try to escape because freedom is worth dying for. That's the real legacy. That's what endures. Chapter 15. A legacy of valor. The war ended. Germany surrendered. The camps were liberated. But the story of those 76 men who crawled through Tunnel Harry that lived on. Not just as military history or some footnote in dusty archives. No, this became something much bigger. A symbol. A rallying cry. The Great Escape proved something the Nazis never wanted the world to see. That you can cage a man's body, but his spirit? His refusal to surrender? That's completely untouchable. And 50 good men died, proving exactly that. Think about what those men achieved. Not the 3 who made it home, though that matters. Not even the tunnel itself, impressive as it was. What they did was bigger than any single escape. They forced Nazi Germany to mobilize thousands of troops, police, Gestapo agents, railway workers, citizens searching every barn, every forest, every road for months. Imagine that, 76 prisoners bringing an empire to its knees for one night, making Hitler himself furious enough to order murder. That's the kind of defiance that echoes through history. Roger Bushell knew the risks. They all did. The Geneva Convention was supposed to protect captured soldiers, but Hitler had already shown what his word was worth. When the Gestapo started rounding up the escapees, when the orders came down to execute rather than return them to prison, Bushell and the others faced their fate the same way they'd faced everything else, with courage, with dignity, with the absolute refusal to let their captors break them. Even at the end, they were still escaping, just in a different way. The families didn't know for months. Wives waiting for letters, parents checking the casualty lists, children asking when daddy was coming home from the war, the Red Cross inquiries, the careful diplomatic language, missing, status unknown. Then slowly, terribly, the truth emerged. Not killed in combat, not died of disease, murdered, shot in cold blood by men who'd sworn oaths to follow the laws of war. The 50 became martyrs, their names carved in stone, their story told and retold until it became legend. But here's what gets me about the whole thing. After the war, when the investigators started tracking down the murderers, they found them, one by one. Former Gestapo agents trying to blend into civilian life. SS officers claiming they were just following orders. The RAF's Special Investigation Branch didn't give up. They hunted these men across a ruined continent. 18 captured, 13 executed. Justice delayed but not denied. The message was clear: murder prisoners of war, and we will find you. We will remember. We will make you pay. The 3 who made it home, they carried something heavy back with them. Not just the memory of escape, but the weight of survival. Why them? Why not the others? Per Bergsland made it to Sweden. Jens Müller to Sweden. Bram van der Stok all the way to Gibraltar. 3 men out of 76. They became witnesses, living proof that it happened, that their friends died for something real. They spent the rest of their lives telling the story, making sure the 50 weren't forgotten, making sure the sacrifice mattered. The tunnel itself, they filled it with concrete after the escape, sealed it forever. But you know what's strange? Visitors to the site today, they can still feel something there. The weight of what happened, the echo of desperation and hope mixed together. Tour guides point out where the hut stood, where Harry broke through, where those first few men tasted freedom for just a moment before the searchlights found them. The ground holds memory. The earth remembers what those men sacrificed for one night of defiance. Books were written, movies made. The story grew bigger than the men who lived it. Some of that's good, keeps the memory alive, honors the sacrifice, but some of it missed the point. This wasn't about adventure or thrills or beating the bad guys in some clean Hollywood ending. This was about duty, the simple, terrible, beautiful idea that a soldier's job isn't done just because he's been captured, that resistance itself is victory, that dying free is better than living caged. These men understood something we're still learning. Their names are carved in stone now. Memorial walls in churchyards and military cemeteries. Roger Bushell, Johnny Bull, Tim Wallen, Bob Tuck, all 50 of them, fathers and sons and brothers who chose to dig rather than wait, who chose action over acceptance, who looked at Nazi Germany's most secure prison and said not good enough. Every year people visit those memorials, leave flowers, salute, remember, the dead teaching the living what courage actually looks like, what it costs, why it matters, even when it fails. But the real legacy isn't carved in stone. It's carried in the hearts of everyone who refuses to give up when things look hopeless. Every prisoner who keeps planning escape, every person under occupation who hides weapons or passes messages, or just says no when the oppressor demands yes. The Great Escape became a template, proof that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they refuse to accept the unacceptable. That spirit, that absolute refusal to surrender, that's what those men really gave us. That's the treasure they buried in our hearts. Sometimes I wonder what Bushell would think of how we remember him. The lawyer who became a warrior, the man who turned a prison into a battleground. Would he be proud that children learn his name in history class? That his story teaches courage to new generations? Or would he just want us to remember the others too? The men who died beside him, the friends who didn't make it home. Heroes aren't usually interested in being heroes. They're just people doing what needs doing, no matter the cost. The war ended 79 years ago. The last survivors are gone now. No more first-hand accounts. No more voices from that night in March, when 76 men crawled through darkness toward an uncertain freedom. But their story, that keeps breathing, keeps teaching, keeps reminding us that freedom isn't free, and courage isn't easy, and sometimes the greatest victory looks like defeat. Those men escaped more than just a prison. They escaped into immortality, into the place reserved for people who choose principle over safety. So when you feel trapped, when the walls close in and the problems seem insurmountable, when giving up looks like the only sensible choice, remember Tunnel Harry. Remember the men who spent a year digging through sand and clay and hope, who knew the odds were impossible but dug anyway, who understood that trying and failing is better than not trying at all, who proved that the human spirit, properly motivated, can break through anything, even concrete walls, even death itself, even time. That's their gift to us. Not just a story, but a standard. Not just history, but hope. The Great Escape teaches us that freedom lives in the heart first, then in the world. That courage is contagious. That resistance, even futile resistance, plants seeds for future victories. 76 men crawled into legend on March 24th, 1944. 50 died for it. 3 made it home. All of them, every single one, achieved immortality. Their legacy of valor burns bright. Sleep well, knowing such men once lived, and dream of Tunnel Harry.